Well, I just want to start by just saying how moving it's been to listen to all of the presenters tonight.
Yes.
I mean, and Alice, I have to say, when you said that my father was so much himself, I mean, that was, you just like hit it right there, because that was such a key aspect of him, that he didn't change depending on who he was with, whether that person was important or a somebody or a nobody or this or he was always himself. And you could, and it was relaxed and it was not put on, or it was nothing. And I think the other thing, and that really brought him back to me. So that was very sweet to hear you, just all of what you said. So thank you. It's so great to see you too. It's been a long time, I think. Yeah. And I've been just finding all of the presenters tonight very moving, and I feel very grateful to be able to be here with all of you on what would have been his 100th birthday. And I've been thinking about what might be of interest to you, and I know folks have certain ideas about things you'd like me to talk about, and I'm probably not going to fulfill some of those expectations. But, you know, I have my own experience of growing up with my father and, of course, my mother. And since my father died 12 years ago, as the executor of the Howard Zinn Trust, I've gotten to know and appreciate my father's work and life in a way that I actually hadn't before. You know how it is when you're a kid of somebody, you're just kind of doing your thing, and as you grow up, you're living your life, and there's so much that kind of went by me. And it's only been since I've been the executor that I've really been immersed in a lot of the work I hadn't known about before. And it's been a huge privilege for me to work, even in small ways, with some of the people and organizations involved in this event. It's been enlightening and gratifying and deeply meaningful to me, and I've learned so much from them. So I bow to all of you who've been involved in this and all the incredible work you're doing. I'm just going to give a little bit of background on my parents and my childhood with things that I thought might be of interest, and who knows. Both my parents grew up poor and working class in Brooklyn, New York. My father went to college on the GI Bill. My mother didn't go to college until many years later. She read a great deal, and she had a keen and discerning eye and was a great editor. My father relied on her to read his work and give him feedback. He had always focused his writing on specific issues and movements, but a people's history was broader in scope, and there were key moments when he benefited from my mother's encouragement to keep working on it, because she understood how important it would be. When we left New York City when I was 9 and my brother Jeff was 7, we had been living on the Lower East Side in the Lillian Wald housing project. I remember it as a wonderfully diverse and friendly community. And then my father got a job teaching at Spelman College in Atlanta. And we drove for 3 days and arrived on campus to a new world. This is how my father describes it in his memoir. We arrived in Atlanta on a hot and rainy night, and Roz and the children awoke to watch the shimmering wet lights on Ponce de Leon Avenue. Actually, just hearing the word Ponce de Leon Avenue really brought back. We were in a different world, 1,000 miles from home, a universe removed from the sidewalks of New York. Here was a city thick with foliage, fragrant with magnolias and honeysuckle. The air was sweeter and heavier. The people were blacker and whiter. And he goes on to describe the difficulty of finding someone who would rent to us when they found out where my father worked. And with his usual empathy and insight, he said, "What for us was an inconvenience was for Black people a daily and never-ending humiliation, and behind that, a threat of violence to the point of murder." After about a year, we moved to an apartment on the Spelman College campus, in a wing of the infirmary building. One of my fondest memories as a child was participating in plays put on by the Atlanta University Players. The theatrical director, Baldwin Burroughs, and musical director, J. Preston Cochran, and the student actors were also gifted and dedicated. There's so much I don't remember from my childhood, but what happened in the process of rehearsing and being part of that warm, creative community was extremely meaningful to me. A highlight was being one of the children in their production of the musical, The King and I. And at that time, there wasn't the more widespread consciousness we have now of the many issues in the play related to colonialism. But in Atlanta at that time, it was unusual to have an integrated cast. My mother played the British teacher Anna, and the king was played by Johnny Popwell, a student at Morehouse. Sometimes so-called amateur productions are more compelling than professional ones, and that was certainly true of this one.
Wow.
Nice. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I had one question for you too. Myla, you mentioned that as the executor of the Howard Zinn Trust, you have gotten to know your father's work and life in a way you hadn't before. So I was wondering if you had some pieces you've most appreciated or learned from.
Well, thanks for asking that question. There's so much to explore in my father's writing and also in the videos of him speaking on both the howardzinn.org and the zinneducationproject.org websites. But for now, I'd just like to recommend just a few resources for folks interested in learning more about his life and work. I recently rewatched the documentary, You Can't Be Neutral on a Moving Train. And I was really struck by how skillfully and movingly it conveys the arc of my father's life and his involvement in the major movements of his time. And there's my father's book, The Southern Mystique, as well as his book about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which has been mentioned tonight, titled SNCC, The New Abolitionists. I want to mention Bill Bigelow's interview with my father, recorded a few days before he died, titled One Long Struggle for Justice. And there are videos of my father testifying at trials on the history of civil disobedience. And it's quite a lesson just to watch those testimonies that he gives. And more generally, I've also learned important history that I didn't know from the postings on the Zinn Education Project's This Day in History. So thank you to the Zinn Education Project for that. I've gotten a lot of the education I missed out on in my life. And lastly, you can hear my father's wonderful sense of humor in many of his speeches, which were for the most part unscripted. They are collected in the book Howard Zinn Speaks.
Thank you for sharing all that.
I just want to say it's been really heartwarming to be here tonight with so many teachers and people's historians, librarians, artists, and importantly, students who are carrying this work forward and maintaining its integrity and broadening its reach. I mean, it's just been phenomenal. So thank you so much.